I hope everyone enjoyed their lunch. Now we will finally begin session 2, titled Prospects and Challenges in the Denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. This session will be moderated by Dr. Jong-seok, former Unification Minister and also a senior research fellow at these Haejong Institutes. Dr. Lee, you may now take the floor.
예, 안녕하십니까?
Now, we'll start with the second session 2, where we will discuss prospects and challenges in denuclearization of the Korean Peninsula. I think in line with the topic of this session, as you know, the situation around Korean Peninsula is very much changing. As you know, President Xi Jinping is going to visit North Korea tomorrow, and there is even contribution by the President Xi now available in the Rodong Daily of North Korea, which is really surprising. So let me introduce the panelists here. Starting from my left, we have Vice President IVASHENTSOV of Russian International Affairs Council. And next to him, we have a Senior Research Fellow, KATO Yoichi of Asia Pacific Initiative. Next to him, we have Director Leon SIGAL, the Social Science Research Council. And we have Senior Research Fellow Yang Xiyu of China Institute of International Studies. And as you may know, we have also Professor Kim Joonhyung of Handong Global University. Actually, long time before we had today, I actually posed two questions to the panelists. The first question was that currently, between DPRK and U.S., the negotiation for denuclearization, how do you assess that? And currently it's in stalemate, and what is the reason behind it, and what are the challenges posed because of it? The second question I posed to the panelists is that, given such a situation, how can we make advancement to that DPRK U.S. negotiations? Please give your solution. So each panelist on each questions, they will share their thoughts first for about 5 minutes, and then the order of presentation will be from my left onwards. And after they have finished their talk, then other panelists could join in to give comments or additional comments. So there will be another 5 minutes. So about that, we'll come to conclusion about the first question. So that's 5 plus 5 minutes. Then move on to the second question. Again, each have 5 minutes to speak, give their view. And then after listening to other panelists' view, I'll give you another 5 minutes to give your feedback on other comments. So with that, I do believe, we have 100 minutes allotted to us, but already time has passed and there will be other discussions. So I think we can actually have 2 hours rather than 100 minutes. The panelists, not only in their country, but are leading experts internationally. And we might have a full plate and not be able to accept a question from the floor. I hope that you will understand. So the current status of the DPRK-US negotiation and the stalemate, what is the problem? Let's start discussion on that. So 5 minutes each, gentlemen. And first, I would like to ask Vice President IVASHENTSOV to go first.
I think the note of security problems on the Korean Peninsula has 2 main components. Now, at the forefront is the nuclear crisis associated with the DPRK nuclear missile program. Within the last 1.5 years, we have 3 inter-Korean summit and 1 North Korean American summit, which were dealing with this crisis. Very important and interesting declarations were adopted, but the question, however, is that the stated intentions of the parties to achieve stability and peace on the Korean Peninsula are not yet supported by real deeds. I think why say this American-North Korean summit at Hanoi ended with fiasco? And why are these problems in the North Korean-American nuclear dialogue there? Because the problem is, I think, due to the fact that President Trump turned from threats of a military strike on Pyongyang in 2017 to the summit with Kim Jong-un in 2018 was largely forced. You see, the persistence of President Moon Jae-in of the Republic of Korea in the cause of inter-Korean detente played its role. And on the other hand, the reluctance of United States allies to get involved in a new American action in Korea, which was clearly manifested at Vancouver meeting in January 2018 of the foreign ministers of the states whose troops fought in the Korean War of 1953 on the side of the South as part of the so-called United Nations forces in Korea. And you see, if the DPRK has taken real steps and made concrete proposals for dialogue with the United States, the American side seems to have a different situation. And while Pyongyang expected that the suspension of missile and nuclear tests, as well as the elimination of the Punggye-ri nuclear test site could be reciprocated with cancellation of at least a part of sanctions, Washington continued to persist in maintaining all sanctions until complete nuclear missile disarmament of the DPRK. But I think there is one very important issue which is to be clarified, but very often it is not clarified. Because you see, what does the very word denuclearization mean? Kim Jong-un was talking not about the unilateral denuclearization of the North, but about the denuclearization of the entire Korean Peninsula, both North and South. And this is the wording included in the joint statement of the Singapore-Trump-Kim summit. And in that case, Pyongyang cannot just disarm unilaterally. Pyongyang needs to confirm that there are no United States tactical nuclear weapons in South Korea, as President George Bush Sr. said in 1991, and no such weapons will be deployed there in the future, as well as no United States ships with nuclear weapons called to South Korean ports, and no United States strategic bombers enter the Korean airspace. And if the United States requires inspections at North Korea's nuclear facilities, Pyongyang has the right to demand the opportunity to verify the absence of nuclear weapons in South Korea, including at the United States military bases. So the very subject of negotiations is very complicated, and we should not be led by media slogans. Just denuclearization. Denuclearization doesn't mean that the PRK will disarm unilaterally. Denuclearization is a very complicated, a long-term process. So I think I have completed my 5 minutes limit. Thank you.
예, 대사님 고맙습니다. 주로 비핵화의 의미 그리고 비핵화와 관련된 그 상호성에 대해서 이것이 잘 안 돼서 결국은 지금 잘 교착이 되고 있는 거 아닌가라는 말씀해 주셨습니다. 뒤에 다시 관련해서 한 5분 정도 말씀을 다시 하실 기회가 있을 겁니다. 예, 그럼 다음은 가토 선생님 부탁드립니다.
Yes, thank you very much for this opportunity. Since I'm the only one from Japan, I'd like to talk about how the current situation over the last 12 months since the Singapore summit looks like from Japan's point of view and what Japan is doing. And in the second round, I'm going to make my own proposal to overcome the stalemate of this denuclearization issue. First, the current status assessment and also what Japan is doing. The Trump-Kim summit in Singapore in June last year created unprecedented and sudden diplomatic euphoria and a sky-high expectation for possible breakthrough in North Korean issues in Japan, just as the rest of the region. However, after the second Hanoi summit ended with no deal in February this year, and was followed by negative developments, including the launch of missiles, such optimism has quickly subsided. In addition, the pessimism has come back. Japan's Shinzo Abe administration is now trying to capitalize on whatever the remaining momentum that the Singapore summit created a year ago. This kind of somber view is only logical if you look at the recent developments in the regional security environment around Japan. Despite a flashy performance at the Singapore summit and a number of following tweets and statements by the US President Donald Trump, loaded with optimism, there has not been any substantial achievements toward the denuclearization of North Korea through the last 12 months. The history of negotiation of North Korea denuclearization can be described as a repeated failure of bringing freeze of ongoing development of nuclear weapons and missiles to dismantlement of existing inventory of these weapon systems, especially nuclear weapons. We have seen many cases, one after another, in which North Korea walked away with all kinds of economic aid that the other countries offered in return for North Korea's freeze of ongoing developments. But North Korea has not dismantled even one single nuclear warhead to this day. In fact, to the contrary, North Korea kept on adding to its nuclear arsenal. That's the reality. This same pattern has only been repeated in the recent rounds of summit talks between the United States and North Korea, as well as inter-Korean talks. As a matter of fact, it is worse this time around than the past failure because the United States and ROK decided to suspend, scale down, and reorganize their joint exercises. That decision damaged the readiness of USFK and ROK military, and as a result, eroded the deterrence against North Korea and jeopardized the security of Japan. Japan now thinks that it is in the same operational theater with ROK in terms of facing the threat from North Korea. The premise used to be that if Japan would ever come under attack from North Korea, it must be based on a so-called spillover scenario. But now Japan is fully aware that Japan may even be the first to get hit by North Korean missiles due to the advancement of their offensive capabilities and the change of their tactics and strategy. In that sense, this deterrence issue is critical to Japan's security. To reiterate, the reality for Japan 12 months after the Singapore summit is that we are left with North Korean nuclear missiles capabilities that are not decreased at all, combined with the eroded deterrence capability of USFK and ROK military. The overall security environment surrounding Japan has gotten worse through this time of diplomatic euphoria. And there is not much Japan can do about it. Japan's sense of nuclear security is also eroding. The sense of nuclear security among the Japanese people depends on two major elements. One is the Non-Proliferation Treaty, NPT regime, and the other is US extended deterrence. The credibility of the both has been deteriorating. considering this kind of change of strategic environment, it is only natural that Japan would give a serious consideration to acquiring its own deterrence capability to safeguard its security. Among the 5 of 6 party talks members, only Japan has not yet had a summit talk with Kim Jong-un. With the fading momentum of Trump-Kim Jong-un summits and the deteriorating security environment, the Abe administration has decided to take on unprecedented initiative to open a direct diplomatic channel with North Korea. The Abe administration has taken a distinct turn in its approach to North Korea just recently, namely to soften its position and tone down its criticism in order to make an Abe-Kim Jong-un summit possible and happen. It is said that North Korea has demanded that Japan demonstrate its sincerity if it wants to have a direct summit with Kim Jong-un, and Abe administration responded by taking several conciliatory actions and gestures, including the following. 1. In March, Japan decided not to take part in the submission of a draft resolution condemning North Korea's human rights abuses to a United Nations panel. 2. Japan's Ministry of Foreign Affairs struck out the expression of maximizing the pressure on North Korea regarding nuclear missile issues from this year's diplomatic blue book. 3. In May, Prime Minister Abe declared that he would meet with Kim Jong-un without setting any preconditions and hold frank discussions. Abe's previous position was that if it were not for the prospect of resolving the abductees issue, it would be of no use to have a meeting with the North Korean leader. It has been Japan's long-held position regarding the North Korean issues that abductees, the nuclear and missile issues, all 3 of them, must be solved as a package. In other words, Japan will not accept the prioritization of nuclear missile issues. This sometimes invited criticism from other 6 party talks members. Abe made these decisions of taking conciliatory approaches, overriding some objections within the Japanese government and running some political and diplomatic risks. But so far, there is no positive response from North Korea. There is no prospect of having the first face-to-face meeting with Kim Jong-un. If these efforts ended with a failed attempt at the end of the day, it would further highlight Japan's powerlessness or lack of ways and means to engage in negotiation on the North Korean issues in an effective manner. And of course, if these summit talks came to happen, there would be no guarantee for desirable outcomes. With that, I stop. Thank you very much.
예, 감사합니다, 가토 교수님.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kato. I think your comment is quite opposite to the remarks by Mr. IVASHENTSOV. After the last negotiation on denuclearization, currently North Korea is not really cooperative in making progress. And actually, Japanese are worried about the potential direct attack from the north. So because of this sentiment of the Japanese, the current situation will not have easy solutions. So probably that is the summary of the presentation. Next presentation, Mr. Leon Seeger, please.
Thank you all for having me here and for coming out to listen to all of us. You all know the public story of the rhetoric, Trump's excessive threatening rhetoric and similar rhetoric coming out of Pyongyang in the run-up to the first summit, the Singapore summit. Let me tell you a very different story that you may not know about. When he ran for president, Donald Trump surprised a lot of us by talking repeatedly, including at rallies of his faithful, about negotiating with North Korea. Some of us heard it, and let me tell you, I know personally that the North Koreans heard it loud and clear. talks began within 3 months of Trump's taking office. Yes, you know all about the public rhetoric, but you don't know that talks were going on throughout this period. By the way, the public rhetoric was not matched by anything on the military side. The National Security Advisor kept trying to get military options, and neither the Joint Chiefs nor the Secretary of Defense wanted to play. So what you were seeing was CNN putting armchair retired generals telling you war was coming when this was all nonsense, and the North Koreans knew it and were talking about the Americans are bluffing. And they even said it on KCNA, in case you watched. Okay? So there's a lot of talk about why Hanoi failed, but one of it was not that there were no working level talks. There were working level talks between U.S. and DPR diplomats for months before Singapore, before Hanoi. That wasn't the problem. It's slightly different and not trivial. The working level talks led to a meeting by Pompeo, the Secretary of State, with Kim Jong-un himself in October in Pyongyang. At that meeting, the United States put its willingness to negotiate an end of war declaration on the negotiating table with the North Korean leader. And he in turn said, and I quote here, U.S. Special Representative Began, Kim Jong-un made an unprecedented offer of, and I'm quoting, dismantlement and destruction of North Korea's plutonium and uranium enrichment facilities and more. Those were Began's words describing the meeting. The problem was in the run-up to the Hanoi summit, the North Korean negotiators stopped short of what Kim had seemingly offered in Pyongyang. And so that opened the way for John Bolton to do his thing, the go big proposal. Denuclearization first, and then a beautiful future for North Korea, which some of us describe as the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And it was, needless to say, not something the North Koreans were interested in. With both sides demanding more than they were prepared to concede in return, the gap between the two sides, which had actually closed earlier, now widened at the Hanoi summit. Now the task is to close the gap again. And remember, there are things on the table that both sides have put that are ready to be picked up if we have another run-up to another summit. Now, since the Hanoi summit, some have reinterpreted Bolton's proposal as a, quote, roadmap. But a goal of a comprehensive roadmap is unrealistic, and there's some in Seoul who have been talking about a roadmap. You can't have a roadmap. And the reason is this. North Korea is not prepared to spell out denuclearization in any detail because the United States is not prepared to put on the table what Kim Jong-un wants, which is a security treaty with the United States like we have with the ROK. That you may not know about, but those of us who've been talking to the American interlocutors with the North Koreans have been hearing this since the early 90s. Okay? I don't know whether they mean it. You only find out when you try it. Instead of a roadmap, it seems to me what we need to do is to talk about, seek phase deals with what Began calls confidence-building steps. We don't have a step-by-step approach anymore. We have confidence-building for confidence-building, the rhetoric's changed, that's all. Now, Trump says he wants another summit meeting with Kim, and he's made that clear on many occasions. If so, negotiations obviously need to resume soon. And the ball is actually in the U.S. court. Washington, and unfortunately not Seoul, needs to communicate directly and privately to Pyongyang it is willing to negotiate near-term steps to reconcile, to end enmity. Now, actually, Kim's letter provides a suitable occasion for that kind of response. It's not You can't talk to the North Korean diplomats directly. They're waiting for a message before they'll talk to U.S. officials and, in fact, other Americans. Later today in Washington, stay tuned, because Began is going to give a speech with your negotiator, and he may give a hint whether we've already passed the message to the North. I don't know the answer to that. But we need to return to Singapore, to the joint statement there. The way to get over the Hanoi summit is to return to Singapore. I can sketch in some of the near-term deal, but the more important thing that I want to talk about later on is the larger frame for any negotiation beyond the next steps. I'll stop here.
예, 감사합니다.
Thank you very much. I think we've just heard some of the things that we have not known so far or have not been disclosed so far. And the problem got worsened by the engagement of John Bolton at the Hanoi meeting. So here, let us focus on the reason why the current status is currently we are in a deadlock. So let's focus on that. So I would like to invite the other remaining two panelists to present on the first question for 5 minutes. Then, amongst the panelists, if you have any comments or questions, to the other panelists, we can have discussions. And then the second question will be presented from the far left person from me. So I believe the next panelist is Mr. Yang Xiyu. He's from China, who is a major player in this process. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I'm really appreciate Sejong Institute that invited me to be here to express my observations and views, especially give me a great opportunity to learn from many of my old and new friends. And I'd like, regarding to the reasons of the current status of the situation, I'd like to make 2 points. Firstly, what is the real reason for the results? I'm not going to say failure, but results of the Hanoi summit. I think it's very simple. The result was made by different expectations from Pyongyang and Washington, D.C. for this very important summit. American colleagues complained that when they sent a big team, big negotiation team to Pyongyang, Pyongyang only sent 4 persons to negotiate with the big team of Americans. That includes political officers and plus nuclear technical engineers and legal experts, and everyone included. For Pyongyang's team, only 4 persons, including an interpreter. And so you can imagine the negotiation went nowhere. And under strong requirements for the from the United States, Pyongyang promised, okay, when we move to Hanoi, we would send more persons. And when they met in Hanoi again, U.S. kept the big team, and for North Korea, sent 1 more person than previous team, say 5 persons, including an interpreter. So you can simply say, oh, North Korea did not have intention to make a deal. Such a simple conclusion was wrong. Just imagine their top leader, after spending more than 60 hours railway travel to Hanoi, and intentionally want to get no results. That's That's not the logic from Pyongyang. But what is the logic for Pyongyang in the negotiation, pre-summit negotiation, by sending such a small team? I think different expectation. For Pyongyang, their calculation is far before the Hanoi summit, they have done a great down payment. They have put great down payments. They argued, okay, between US and DPRK, there was no trust. We had no credit to the United States. And then we can make something like down payment. So they did something, they did dismantlement at nuclear test site, and they dismantled the launching pad, and they returned numerous remains of MIA, and also promise, if not committed, promise to dismantle all facilities and items at Nyangbian. That is the most important nuclear base for North Korea. And in short, they have done a payment. They have do a down payment by doing 3+1, 3 things plus the promise at Nyangbian. So their calculation is, when we met together again at Pyongyang and Hanoi, there should be Americans' turn to make the similar down payment to me, because you, the United States, has no credit either to me. So for the two parties negotiation, first thing first, both sides should make mutual down payment so that we can build up the so-called confidence building base. That is why Pyongyang said, now it's your turn to explain or to promise what you will do. And our negotiation team, the duty of our negotiation team is just to write down, no taker, write down what you are going to do. So that is not North Korea's expectation, say through Hanoi summit, and the US should do something as a return. And for US expectation, totally different. Say, it was great, you have done 3 things, and it should be greater, you need to do more based on the 3+1. So just because of the different expectations, the negotiation, including the top-level meeting, failed. So that is my views of the reason for the results of the Hanoi, and also that is the reason for the current dialogue between the United States and Pyongyang. Pyongyang argued they could wait till the end of this year for the 3rd summit as well as the negotiations. But the precondition is US need to have a new proposal. And that's the first point I want to make. And second point is, after Hanoi summit, almost all parties related have focused too much on sanction measure lifting for North Korea. And we suppose that North Korea pays special attention on the lifting sanction. But in fact, I think the different calculation and the different expectation from Pyongyang is we are trying to persuade North Korea to give up the gun. That is the guarantee for their life. And what kind of things can match the gun that can guarantee their life? Lifting sanctions as a carrot? I don't think it makes sense, because both bright futures or individual concrete lifting sanction measures won't address their concerns, even fears about the national security. So basically, I think if we really want to break up the current deadlock, we need to think about the comprehensive measures, not only the lifting sanction measure, but also some measures from security arena. So that is the 2 points I want to make. Let me stop here. Thank you.
예, 양 백사.
Well, thank you, Dr. Yang. Well, in some way, between U.S. and DPRK, in terms of expectation, there is a difference. And from DPRK's side, various suspension of nuclear tests, the down payment was not made, but the U.S. had different view. So because of that, it led to stalemate, leading to failure. Of course, Dr. Yang wanted to say result rather than failure, but thank you for the comment. And now, Professor Kim. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm also going to speak in Korea, if I may. Now, it's now third year, 2017. There was we were on the brink of war on the Korean Peninsula. And in 2018, surprisingly, the peace process really accelerated. Now we stand in 2019. So compared to where we compare against, the assessment result will be different, because if we compare this year to 2017, there is a still window of opportunity, and compared to 2017 in terms of the war probability, and because that has been gotten away, I think Trump, also China, they're kind of they're faced with problems of controlling the speed. But anyway, it's better than 17, but compared to 18 optimism we experienced, some people say this is stalemate, and some say it's a vacuum, and some even say that window of opportunity is closing. But I believe 2018 was special because there was a DMZ declaration, but a denuclearization issue is U.S. DPRK issue. So depending where we are, I think that the starting point should be the Singapore summit. Many people say that from that summit, 4 joint agreements were very abstract, and many say it's not really has a concrete content. But I think that is the end state. What I mean by that is that between U.S. and DPRK, the end state they need to reach was first given, and then follow up. Hanoi and other negotiations should have followed to feel that the end state. I think that's also a view shared by DPRK. Up to now, U.S. DPRK, I believe the relations were turned upside down, so it was a historic event, because before that, the two-country relations, as we said in the session 1, there was no trust, period. So the previous relations was that we will trust only after denuclearization. So denuclearization first, and then trust can be built. That was pre-Singapore summit. But what they agreed in summit is that we are in a new negotiation. We'll trust first and do denuclearization. I think we need to really focus on such change of stance. So at least Kim Jong-un saw hope in there, and the top-down approach we're talking about between Trump and Kim Jong-un trust, from there we tried to solve issues. But between these two people, they had an agreement, but from the weak side, and given the fact that overall structure, Kim Jong-un and the North Korean regime, they clearly knew they were in disadvantaged position and weak position, because initial step need to be taken by DPRK, and what the U.S. can do only comes later after signing diplomatic relationship or peace agreement only came later. Then Kim Jong is very fully aware of that. Then can we only trust on what they said and go ahead? And Kim Jong at that time wanted some evidence that the U.S. has changed, that we are in a new level of relationship. He wanted to sign. First sign he wanted was the end of war declaration in Singapore, and second was sanction easement that he proposed in Hanoi. He knew that he should not put that on the table. And in Singapore, end of war declaration, if that was given with that taken as sign, he could have confirmed that U.S. has changed. And to throw that out, what did the DPRK give? Word for word, it was action for action. But whether U.S. makes an assessment of that or not, preemptively North Korea giving us something that had never happened. Dongchangni, Punggye-ri, that's the moratorium. But as you know, in Hanoi, that actually crumbled. Before Hanoi, for 8 months or so, there was deadlock or stalemate. And in that situation, what was the biggest concern for DPRK was that whether U.S. seems to have been hunkered back in the past. Did Trump also hunker back to the past? And to confirm that, and Trump, I think 63 hours of train, right, is what Kim Jong-un did to confirm the trust was still there with Trump, but Kim Jong-un's trust was broken. He wanted to see Trump, despite everything, that he could still trust Trump, but that was broken, and it was really shocking, and they have not really recovered from the shock as of yet, and that's why they have not really formed a position as of yet. The regime, security of the regime that North Korea wants. But I think North Korea's end state, what it wanted, is exchange between security regime and denuclearization. But now it's sanction easement and denuclearization. So from North Korean perspective, it's not a swap or exchange, because sanction easement or sanction ending is from minus to zero. It's not a symbol. It's not talking about security regime that they want. Then Hanoi, how did they turn back that clock? Not to 2017. I think the clock went back just before Singapore, because just before Singapore, the approach was Bolton's approach, right? You had to do denuclearization, and then you can have trust, and then U.S. will give something. So U.S. went back to pre-Singapore. That's the analysis result of North Korea. What does North Korea want? They never wanted their government to be sustained. What the internal change, internal economic reform they want to do by themselves. From U.S. clear, they want three things: normalized relationship, no economic sanctions, and without sanctions, we will do the economic development. Thirdly, security, the most important thing. So antagonistic stance of the U.S. should be stopped. That three things are clearly demand from the North Korea. Then lastly, what is the U.S. side position? Since Hanoi, as I said before, just before Singapore, the clock has turned to that position, and within U.S., about three positions are gaining traction. The first one is that sanction solves everything in Hanoi. Kim Jong-un said sanction is hurting us. That means it's not to stop sanction. We have to push forward so that he can really come to his knees. That's what they want. Secondly, Kim Jong-un is not talking about end state, meaning he was never sincere about denuclearization. That was proven by Hanoi's stance, that they didn't talk about end state because they were not willing to do it and was just buying for time. Thirdly, the limitation of top-down approach. So working level negotiation, without that, if you push just for top-down, there was always that constraint. It looks very reasonable from outside, but this new type of approach, working level negotiation, reviving the negotiation, not that technical or working on the working level negotiation. They want Moon or Kim or Trump's top-down approach. They want to get rid of that. That is the new power's voice. So it looks reasonable, and yes, of course, we need working level negotiation, but that replacing top-down approach, I think we need to be very cautious. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim. So North Korea wants some sign that whether Kim Jong-un can trust North Korea and Trump, and that sign was not provided North Korea, and that led to the collapse of the Hanoi summit. So we've heard from the 5 panelists. So rather than taking the same order, I would like to give you the free floor, whether you have comments or questions to other panelists' remarks. So it's free to you. Whoever go first, go first. Which one will go first?
I have a comment. If I understand things correctly, the U.S. already had put before Hanoi the end of war declaration on the table. At Hanoi, the two parties, both Kim and Trump, agreed on exchange of liaison officers, which is an early step to political normalization. The U.S. also cut back on the joint exercises. So both the political dimension was being addressed and the start of the peace dimension and end of enmity dimension was being addressed, partly by the end of war declaration, partly by the military exercises, reduction in size and scope. Okay? The problem was the U.S. didn't want to give very much in the way of sanctions relief, although we have, in fact, done some sanctions relief in the form of exemptions from UN sanctions for some things South Korea wants to do as a signal that we're prepared to move on that front too. Okay? I think that's the state of play before Hanoi. The problem was we didn't get what the North Koreans had indicated in October on the table from the North, and that opened the way for the sudden go big nonsense. Okay? Now where are we? It seems to me 2 points to make. One is shuttering Yongbyon, which is perfectly acceptable to me, is not acceptable to Washington. We're going to have to capture the other enrichment site, the suspect enrichment site. All fissile material production has to stop. And the question is the North willing to do that, and what the quid pro quo is, and is the U.S. prepared to step up on sanctions relief, which is the only quid pro quo we haven't put on the table. And let me suggest a couple of things on sanctions relief. First of all, exempting the reopening of the Kaesong industrial complex. It seems to me that's almost a must if the North is going to stop all fissile material production and commit to dismantling. Secondly, maybe increasing the UN quota for DPRK oil imports. After all, they're getting lots of oil right now, so the net effect of that is zero. But it's acknowledging that we're prepared to move on sanctions. Another is maybe allowing some textile exports. And then finally, ending the U.S. Trading with the Enemy Act, which the United States has twice stopped and then put back on. So that's my near-term sense of where the next summit could go if you have working-level talks to work out the details.
네. 예, 감사합니다. 레온 시가 선생님 말씀 고맙습니다. 다음은 이바스.
Next, Ambassador Ivanachov, if you have something to say.
You see, as for the possibility of the next North Korean American summit, you see, the current North Korean American dialogue at the highest level cannot but be affected by the unequal position of their participants in terms of their domestic and foreign policy agenda. If in 2017 the North Korean leader was seen by the West as a dwarf with a missile who led a sanctions-imposed rogue country, at the summit of 2018 in Singapore, Trump called him a respected chairman and in 2019 a great leader. In the minds of compatriots of Kim Jong-un, he has already surpassed his father and grandfather in his achievements, and undoubtedly has staked the post of the DPRK leader for a long time. Trump's position looks different against the background of his confrontation with the United States Congress and sharp criticism of almost any of his actions by the Democrats and a part of the Republicans, which makes many in the United States and abroad doubt the possibility of his re-election as the president in 2020. Is Kim Jong-un interested in such situation to put all Pyongyang eggs in Trump's basket? It's dubious. It is in Kim's interest to hold off on any specific arrangements to ensure against a situation where Trump's successor will abandon Trump's commitments, just as Trump himself is withdrawing from the contracts concluded by his predecessors today. I would like to ask colleague SIGAL one question. What does this proposal of signing DPRK United States Treaty of End of War? United States has never been at war with the DPRK as a state. American troops participated in the Korean War as a part of the United Nations contingent. How come you signed off to end the war in which you did not participate in as a state?
There are 3 countries with troops on the ground in Korea, the last I looked. And they bumped up against each other many times in the past. If you want to start down a peace process, you have to have an end-of-war declaration. Don't tell me how the U.S. fought in the Korean War. That's legalism. That's not the real world of real Korea. The real world of real Korea is there are 3 forces on the ground here, and they have to start to move away from confrontation. And one way to do that is an end-of-war declaration. That's what the North Koreans seem to want. If that's what they want, I think we should give it to them. And by the way, I don't have to tell you all that Moon Jae-in very much wants us to do that because he understands the situation the way I do. So that's number one. Number two, with respect to the fact that governments change both in Seoul and in Washington, the North Koreans have long understood that, which is why they have a very long time horizon for moving down the road both to end of enmity and to denuclearization. They want to test out that whatever happens with one government in Washington or Seoul will be sustained by the next government. And if it doesn't, guess what? The deals fall apart like they did in the past, and the North is well positioned because it's not going to give up everything to move ahead if that happens.
잠깐만 그러면은
Then, on what you have just said, now the end of war declaration between 2 Koreas and U.S., Dr. Seoul, when you said between U.S. and 2 Koreas, you talked about end of war declaration as the parties to the Korean War. But now, what they are talking about 4 parties, including China, and the war declaration, and North Korea, we believe are very much attracted to that idea. So, Dr. SIGAL, so I just want to confirm, U.S. government, the 4-party end of war declaration is still okay? They are willing to accept that? What's your opinion?
I obviously don't speak for the U.S. government. My own view is if the North Koreans want the Chinese to be part of the end of war declaration, I think that will eventually happen. My own view is that the Chinese absolutely have to be part of the peace treaty. Whether they're part of the end of the war declaration is something that I think we should leave to Pyongyang to decide. As you know, Pyongyang didn't want the Chinese in the end of war declaration until recently. And I would leave that issue to them. Will Washington go along with having the Chinese there? I think reluctantly, but we will. That would be my guess.
예, 그 점에 대해서는 아무튼
Then, in 2007, between President No and Kim Jong-un, there was Inter-Korean Summit, and at that time, the security advisor at the Blue House, we had Chairman Baek Jong-to of Sejong Institute at that time, and what he heard directly from Mr. Kim was that from North Korea, China, they wanted China on the table as a four-party agreement. So it's actually misleading information. So even back then, North Korea wanted China on the table in that agreement. So I think I can say that, right? Now, again, that needs to be confirmed. So North Korea not wanting four-party agreement, I want to state that that's not true.
It was earlier than the 2007. Remember going back when?
네, 예, 그럼 가토 선생님 말씀.
Thank you very much. And then I would like to invite Mr. Kato and then Yang Shi-wi. Mr. Kato first.
Let me express how Japan looks at this efforts to conclude an end of war declaration between United States and North Korea. Basically, it is a good idea to lessen the tension, ease the tension between North Korea and the United States in the peninsula. But from Japan's point of view, it has to be really looked at carefully. From national security point of view, what would happen? What would North Korea do after they succeeded in concluding end of war declaration with the United States? Even though it may not have a legal status, but that will give North Korea to demand withdrawal of U.S. forces in Korea. Since United States agreed the war is over, there is no reason for United States to keep deploying forces in Korean Peninsula. It's obvious that that's what North Korea is going to say next. But without having any dismantlement of actual nuclear weapons and missiles, that really erode the deterrence further, and that will jeopardize the security of Japan. Just as I said, this is much worse than the suspension of joint exercise between ROK and ROK and the United States. So I hope, and Japan really hopes, that the United States will be very careful in under what condition and what circumstances they will go into this end of war declaration with North Korea.
예. 그 가토 선생님 말씀에 대해서.
So on what Mr. Kato says, after end of war declaration, if there's a peace agreement, that the U.S. forces need to leave Korean Peninsula, that's what Japanese is saying. So let me ask you this question.
No, not to all the way to peace treaty, but just by end of war declaration will give North Korea excuse to demand United States to withdraw forces. That concerns Japan.
예.
But my question is this: then, if there's a peace, be it end of war declaration or peace agreement, there's a peace process in Korean Peninsula, and there's peace between North Korea and U.S. And North Korea said you will not demand the U.S. forces to leave Korean Peninsula. That is what Kim Jong-un even said to, and in 2005, in the joint declaration of September, when there was a peace regime on Korean Peninsula discussed, that was also the same stand of North Korea. And recently between inter-Korean talks between Moon and Kim Jong-un, the U.S. forces issue was not even agenda item, but still, their official stance that they will not ask the U.S. forces to leave. You don't believe their official stand? Is that what you're saying? You don't believe North Korea's official position?
North Korea has been changing their statement many times. We'll believe what they do, not what they say.
Yes, but let me jump in.
예, 그럼 자 이렇게 하겠습니다. 레온 시가 선생님.
Mr. Leon Seeger and Mr. IVASHENTSOV.
End of war declaration is signed. Could Pyongyang maintain its nuclear program? Because I think if just such a declaration is signed just now, then everything remains the same. Pyongyang will get a permission to go on with that nuclear missile program?
The terms of trade for the end of war declaration are an end to fissile material production. They will still have some weapons. That's a fact. Okay, but let me step back and say two things. First of all, it might amuse most people in this audience to know not only have the North Koreans told the South on many occasions, including Kim Dae-jung's meeting with back when with Kim Jong-il repeatedly, but they've told Americans for years they want American troops in Korea. The North Koreans want American troops in Korea if the relationship changes. If we're no longer enemies, they want, as part of a security arrangement, to keep American troops here. The propaganda hasn't changed, and the question is, do they mean it? But guess what? If they don't mean it, I have a very simple answer. It's Nancy Reagan's answer. Just say no. We're not going to leave unless South Korea wants us to leave, not North Korea. And it's a very simple proposition.
예, 이 문제는 이제 정리를 하겠습니다.
So then let's wrap up that point. Now, rather than saying North Korea wants U.S. forces to stay, U.S. forces staying in Korean Peninsula, they will not engage. They will see this as a U.S.-Korea, South Korea issue. And what Dr. KATO said, that he will not trust North Korea because they've changed their position so many times. I understand. But once you have normalized relations between U.S. DPRK, DPRK not saying they will not ask the U.S. to forcibly leave. They have maintained their position for 30 years. So we'll see whether they really change. Now, drawing this session to close, I will ask Dr. Yang to talk and then Dr. Kim, and then we'll go to the second topic.
Just brief 2 points as my response. Firstly, the complex problems on the peninsula, very complicated problems, can be summed up by 2 words in Chinese, 和 and 和, nuclear and peace. You have many problems, but fundamentally, the 2 problems are the core of the complex problems on the peninsula. And we are talking about nuclear, but we cannot separate the nuclear from the peace. So regarding the peace, of course, we have had a commonly accepted goal, say, let's set up a permanent peace regime on the peninsula. That was input in the 919 joint statement through the six-party talks. And how to reach the permanent peace regime? And we haven't had a consensus. So in 2005, originally, by the way, I drafted the documents. Ideally, I thought it should be indicate who negotiated with whom about the permanent peace regime. That would be great. So, but because of the sharp differences, then I have to choose a very ambiguous word, say the directly related parties to negotiate, blah, blah, blah. And then the ambiguity left to the 2 Korean leaders in 2007. They made even more stringent terms, say the 3 or 4 parties to negotiate, till the last year between President Moon and Chairman Kim. But what is China's position about that? Our position has been a long time unchanged, say 4 parties. Why? The logic is the 2 Koreas are the masters of the land, just as they repeatedly pointed out. So the 2 Koreas as the major parties. And the US and China historically were major war parties. Currently, are major external powers directly affecting the security and the prosperities on the peninsula. So such a format should be set to negotiate a permanent peace regime on the peninsula. So that's a great goal. But the goal is too complicated to be reached by one step. So thanks to President Moon's initiative, I think that we could reach by two steps, baby step and big step. Baby step means the declaration of the ending state of war. That's a baby step because it's not difficult. It's just, political, symbolic documents. However, it's important and substantive as a CBM. Say, because of the declaration, every party can be in confidence to move forward. And after the baby step as a CBM, then the four parties, I mean the two majors plus the two major outside powers, to negotiate and set the regime by striking a set of treaties, not a single treaty, but several treaties. That could be Usdprk security treaty, just like USRK. That could be the 2 Koreas. That could be the 2 Koreas plus US that deployed 3 troops on the land. And there should be US-China, and there should be the 4 parties. So many formats compose a binding, reliable regime for the permanent peace. So that's the, I think, an ideal arrangement. By the same token, the baby step for the big step should also be signed by the 4 parties, the 2 majors plus 2 outsiders. And secondly, the second point is, we are at the Korean Peninsula now is at a historical crossroad towards either a new era or new cycle. Why I say new cycle? Because last year's positive situation development was nothing new. We have witnessed 2 rounds of good situations. First one is between 1994 till the 2002, characterized by agreed framework. We made great progresses and development, and then we failed. And then we fall in the crisis. Thanks to the SIGAL talks, we saved the Peninsula from the crisis and entered a new cycle, dialogues, rapprochement, and the progresses, and then fail again. And the crisis, even more serious crisis again. And now we are in the 3rd cycle. And if we repeat the previous 2 cycles, no party will be winner, absolutely. So ironically, we are so differentiated. However, the future, the common future, are so attractive to every party. So the current key task is not, lifting this or removing that. The key is how to jointly explore an exit strategy coming out of the current deadlock that could lead the situation into a new cycle. So if we are successful in coming out of the current deadlock, then we will have a great hope towards the new era. Thank you.
예, 양 박사.
Thank you, Dr. Young. If I may share with you a side story, in 2005 to solve nuclear issue in DPRK, we had that September joint agreement, and at that time, we had 5. The China was chair, so we had 5 times of drafting, and it was closely talking with South Korea. I was actually leading the negotiation on the Korean side. So the draft coming from China, even at in the agreement, the final agreement, was very much sophisticated, well-made. So I was at very good sentencing. Who did that in China? So at that time, Ambassador Kuchek and Dr. Yang was with him. So Dr. Yang was the one who drafted everything, that declaration. So he was one of the key major actors there. So thank you. Now, Professor Kim will draw this topic to an end. Yes, let me give you a comment. End of war declaration is a kind of sensitive issue now, but I think it's not a behind episode, it's a behind story. Cross-checked with the U.S. and the South Korean reps. So when it comes to what was behind the closed doors agreement in Singapore, I mean, not 100%, but I can say it's close to truth. The 4 agreement was made in Singapore, but in behind the scene between Kim Jong-un and Trump, unverbally agreed on was exchange between Dong Chang-ni and end of war declaration. Dong Chang-ni is getting rid of the ICBM threat. So for Trump, although was criticized later, he thought this was very important. And after Singapore agreement, he posted immediately on his Twitter that he got rid of immediate threat. And what he gave for that was end of war declaration. And I talked about sign or symbol. But for DPRK, if they really wanted U.S. forces to leave, end of war declaration was not demanded by North Korea, but our president as a political declaration of ending the war. And at the end state, going to the peace treaty, he wanted this as a political starting point or symbol. And North Korea was not interested in the beginning, but they thought this was a symbol showing change on the U.S. side. So North Korea was not really interested in that, but U.S. went back with the end of war declaration, and as Dr. Yoichi said, that resulted in resistance on the Trump side. Because if they do the North Korea, then they would demand U.S. forces to leave. And second argument is that Dong Chang-ni is no longer of use. And without inspection, getting rid of it is meaningless. So 2 issues were raised, and the biggest stalemate reason is because of that. But they tackled in 2 rounds. First, before Pyongyang meeting, our delegation visited North Korea, and Kim Jong-un clearly said that Kim Jong-un, even with the end of war declaration, they promised they do not want U.S. forces to leave. And the Pyongyang declaration, what they said, Dong Chang-ni inspection, they will accept it unconditionally. So they wanted to get rid of the burden on the Trump side and win trust of Trump. That's what North Korea wanted.
Okay, thank you very much. And next, let's move on to the second topic. Second question that I propose to everyone is that how can U.S. DPRK negotiations over denuclearization move forward? I believe Xi Jinping's impending visit to Pyongyang is very important. So we have Mr. Yang Xiyu here, and we have Dr. Kim, and we have U.S. representatives. So everyone is very important representatives from the important parties. So please mention that as well in your remark on the second topic. So again, the question was, how can U.S. DPRK negotiations over denuclearization move forward? So I would like to ask Mr. IVASHENTSOV first, and then in that order, please.
North Korea's nuclear disarmament is too complex a knot of problems to be cut with a single wave and by the American hand only. Pyongyang needs security guarantees. After all, it will have to take a number of irreversible actions, such as providing access to confidential information for verification purposes, not to mention the physical dismantling of nuclear and missile infrastructure. At the same time, all steps on the part of the United States are easily reversible. Military exercises can be resumed, sanctions can be restored, diplomatic recognition can be revoked, etc. In addition, the United States withdrawal from the ABM treaty with my country, the nuclear deal with Iran, and the INF treaty with my country clearly confirmed its unreliability as a treaty partner. But who and what can provide guarantees? Neither China nor Russia will give unilateral security guarantees to North Korea. They will not risk a war with the United States, not for their own interests, but for a state that has not the best appearance in the eyes of the world community. Anyway, Pyongyang seems to be prepared to discuss a multilateral guarantee system. It is no coincidence that Kim Jong-un, after 4 summits with Xi Jinping, 3 with Moon Jae-in and 2 with Trump, went to Vladivostok last April for a summit with Putin, and now talks about the summit with Shinzo Abe. In fact, doesn't that prepare a ground for a return to one or in another form to the 6 parties format to discuss existing problems and develop a system of multilateral guarantees? The progress in resolving the issue of the DPRK's nuclear missile program is possible only through a step-by-step approach that would be at first limit, then reduce, and eventually eliminate the weapons under discussion. It is clear that since the nuclear status of the DPRK is included in the constitution of that country, for Pyongyang, the topic of abandoning the nuclear program as a whole at the moment looks non-negotiable. But what if we start with negotiations on the freezing of the missile development program, as well as guarantees of non-proliferation of missile and nuclear technologies? There is to be the first step to offer way for a long journey. For example, Kim Jong-un announces a moratorium on missile launches and nuclear tests, which in fact is already there, as since November 2017, there have been no tests. Then Pyongyang stops the development of ICBMs, freezes the production of nuclear materials, and opens its nuclear facilities for international inspections. And Washington and Seoul, in response to this, officially recognize the DPRK, establish diplomatic relations with it, exchanges embassies, limit military activities at its borders, reduce and ultimately remove sanctions, and provide economic as well as energy assistance to the North, therefore constituting the regime of peace on the Korean Peninsula, which could further lead to the settlement of the nuclear problem.
예, 대선님 감사합니다.
Thank you, Ambassador. I will not summarize, but Dr. KATO?
Let's not lose the big picture, sight on the big picture. What's the lesson we should learn from the past negotiation with North Korea with regard to denuclearization? It is that freezing of ongoing development does not lead to dismantlement of existing inventory. That's the lesson we have to draw. And we have to find a way to punch the hole of this wall between freeze to dismantle. Otherwise, denuclearization will not happen. That's the lesson we have to draw. With that, I said, I feel very honored and pleased to hear the first round of discussion and Dr. Yang Xiyu talked about mutual double down payment. It was the idea which I launched last month in a conference in New York. And with China joining Japan, I think that's the strongest partner in 5-party talks. But my idea of mutual down payment approach is much more ambitious, because the dismantlement of nuclear facility is not good enough. It doesn't punch the hole from freeze to dismantle. It's not the dismantlement of the existing inventory of nuclear weapons. The goal of nuclearization is to dismantlement of the existing inventory of the nuclear weapon and missiles. Don't get confused about this ultimate goal. And so my theory, my proposal of mutual down payment is as follows. At the beginning or at the early stage of U.S.-North Korea negotiation, the United States partially lift the sanctions or extend an additional economic aid, while North Korea turns over a part of its nuclear warheads and missile arsenal to the United States. And this is an enhanced version of approach that has both the element of incentive and coercion for North Korea. The merits of this approach are 3 points. One, the wall between the freeze and dismantle can be finally taken down, even if it's partially and symbolically. Even one nuclear warhead will do, because it will show how serious North Korea can be in dismantling, with actual deed, not by what they say, but what they do. And second, the United States and North Korea can test their trust each other by doing this. And third, both countries together can build a tangible base to build upon. So this is what I think is necessary. I do not advocate that this is a panacea for all the problems that North Korea poses. As a matter of fact, the Japanese abductees issue is not included. But I believe it is worth trying to clear the biggest hurdle to denuclearization, which demonstrates the past experience we had. Then the path to other issues may open as well. And finally, let me tell you, I would emphasize that the United States, ROK, China, Russia should welcome Japan as in the negotiation. It is because that it's North Korea's negotiation tactic to play the 5 countries against each other. We should not play into their hand. It is also because Japan has been the integral partner for others in the denuclearization negotiation of North Korea. Japan has a role to play, and Japan can make a contribution. Thank you.
예, 가토 선생님 고맙습니다.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kato. Then Mr. Leon Shiger.
You said, which is that sanctions are not what this is about for North Korea. It's about security. Mr. Kim said the same thing. Notice what you just heard was just trading something for sanctions. That doesn't come close to what the North Koreans are. In the North Korean view, sanctions are just one and the least important embodiment of U.S. enmity. The most important ones go to the security questions. And I invite everybody, if you can, to get a hold of Kim Jong-un's speech to the Supreme People's Assembly on April 12th. He lays it out in no uncertain terms for anybody who's listening. And this is not a foreign ministry munchkin. This is the leader himself. So we ought to pay attention to his words, which doesn't mean we have to give him what he wants, but we ought to see whether he means what he says when he wants security. And he doesn't want security guarantees. What he wants is much more far-reaching. What North Koreans, let me just repeat, have long been telling American interlocutors is that they want an alliance like the one the United States has with South Korea, with U.S. troops present, and even explicitly said a nuclear umbrella. Now, I don't know whether they mean it, but I think we have to understand these are the words they've been saying for 30 years. Okay? Now, why would they want the United States as an ally? In a word, China. Pyongyang has never trusted its next-door neighbor, and now more than ever, Kim needs to hedge against Beijing's growing power. It used to hedge by playing Moscow off against Beijing. Now it wants to play us off, us meaning the United States, South Korea, and Japan. Okay? Now, if you ask yourself, what better way for Pyongyang to assure its security without nuclear weapons than to ally with Washington, it's hard to think of a better way. But alliance obviously has its downsides, and let me just suggest a couple. First of all, it's unlikely, exceedingly unlikely, to getting a warm reception in Congress, which would have to approve anything like an alliance. Conservatives in Seoul and Tokyo are unlikely to regard alliance with equanimity, to put it mildly. And a reversal of alliances, especially if U.S. troops remain on the Korean Peninsula as guarantor, alters the balance of power in Asia, which is likely to arouse extreme suspicion, if not outright antagonism, in Beijing. And that would not enhance security for everybody, anybody in the region. So it seems to me we have to think of a better alternative if the North Koreans are serious. And let me suggest one possibility, which is a comprehensive security approach that would involve all the region's actors in parallel negotiations, leading ultimately to a U.S. DPRK security partnership. You begin a four-party peace process on the Korean Peninsula with an end-of-war declaration. What the end-of-war declaration says is the four parties are committed to reach a peace agreement or peace treaty at the end of a peace process. Okay? You declare non-hostility and move to improve normalize relations. You gradually relax sanctions. You set up a six-party Northeast Asian Security Council to try to address some of the regional security issues, which are very, very tough. But remember, six-party puts North Korea at the top table. It gives them the status of being an equal player to the other five. And that's not trivial. And finally, and this is the most important, you establish a nuclear weapons-free zone, which provides a legally binding multilateral way to denuclearize the Korean Peninsula. It also can serve as an alternative, by the way, to an alliance by including the guarantee to the North once it is verifiably free of nuclear weapons, not facilities, but weapons, and will be defended against attack by any other nuclear armed power or ally of such a state by, guess who? The United States. Now, that's a far-reaching proposal, and it is way down a road. But if the North Koreans are serious about alliance, we have to start to think about how we get way down the road, not just the next step, which I sketched out for you already. Convincing Pyongyang that Washington is committed to such a fundamental change in the relationship will take enormous amounts of time and patience and multiple administrations in Washington, not just a year or two. Skeptics are certain the North will never give up its nuclear weapons, alliance or no alliance. How does anyone know for sure? I'm not even sure Kim Jong-il himself knows. It depends how far this goes, how far the relationship can change. The only way to find out is to sustain negotiations and test whether progress to denuclearization can be made through mutual confidence building and a change in the relationship gradually over time. That seems to me the way out.
예, 감사합니다. 시갈 선생님.
Much. Now, I'm not trying to stand by one side because I'm the facilitator, but Dr. Yang, saying DPK wants ease of the economic sanction, and that it wants to exchange with the nuclearization on that. Dr. SIGAL said they want security to their regime, and Dr. Kim is also saying with Dr. Yang, it seems that actually through lifetime we study about North Korea, and Mr. Leon SIGAL, whether he will think Koreans very tough, studying Korean text is not easy because there are many hidden meanings or between the line meanings. So texts analysis about North Korea and South Korea, not easy. North Korean experts' view in South Korea about Kim Jong-un's statement recently that he doesn't care about sanction. That is about, as Dr. Kim said, in the Hanoi summit, Kim Jong-un wanted to save his face. So officially, one swap of denuclearization and security regime. But what he really wants is to have more economic sanction. So economic sanction, he wanted to put that on an agenda item, but Washington actually pressured more, thinking this is really what the North Korea wants. So after the collapse of meeting, that was that additional pressure coming from the Washington is what the North Korea or Kim Jong-un wants. So Kim Jong-un thinks if they say no more sanction, they come with more sanctions. So that's why Kim Jong-un said, I don't care about sanctions. So that actually means he really do not want sanctions. So in the text and behavior shows that's what they really want. But if you just read it by language, they want a secure regime. But actually, what they want is lifting of the concession, and that would follow with security of the regime. So it's they really direly want lifting of the economic sanction, but if they express that officially, they have the trauma that Washington will double the sanction to pressure them more. And that seems to be view shared among the North Korean expert on the South Korea side. So excluding them, because I talked about it, to Dr. Yang, President Xi's visit to North Korea, how do you see that?
Well, President Xi's upcoming visit to North Korea will promote the China-DPRK relation in a higher level bilaterally, but also because of the timing, this visit will be able to contribute new momentum for breaking the deadlock, the impasse between North Korea and the U.S. Because it's well known that right after the summit between Xi Jinping and Kim Jong-un, and there will be a summit between Xi Jinping and Trump. And Trump and Kim are exactly in the impasse. So maybe international observers pay more attention to the second part of Xi Jinping's visit, say how to contribute the new momentum for breaking up the impasse, than the first part, say promoting China-DPRK relation in a higher level. But I want to say one point. One point is, although we will certainly promote DPRK-China bilateral relation in a higher level, China will remain exactly insisting on the commitment to all UNSC resolutions regarding to the North Korea, till some substantive development of dismantlement or denuclearization that are enough to pull UNSC to pass new resolution. And regarding the second point, I will say the new momentum created by Xi Jinping and Kim will be limited, will be great, but not enough to break the impasse, simply because the impasse was the scene between Kim and Trump. So we can say something Kim, and it's possible that Kim can listen and advise or consider positively what Xi Jinping encouraged. But I'm not sure whether or not Trump will do the same thing. If all of us are lucky enough, then we will see both Kim and Trump will positively consider, even accept Xi Jinping's encouragement. But if we are unlucky, then the momentum will appear as very limited. So in other words, we should not pay too high expectation for the Xi-Kim summit regarding to breaking up the current dialogue. Only certain thing is there will certainly be a new momentum and the new hopes and the new probabilities. And the second thing I want to make is lifting sanctions are really, really important. I don't think Kim Jong-un will say, I don't care about the sanction measures. I don't think so. They are indeed care about sanctions. However, how we calculate the effective, how we calculate the sanction measures and the security arrangements for North Korea, or from North Korea point. And let me tell you a story about the dilemma of opportunity cost. I told a friend of North Korean friends of mine, I told him bluntly, I said, you were conducting Beijing policy, development of nuclear and development of economy. I said, no way, you can get one of development, you will get nothing about the other. So during the past few years, North Korea made great progresses on the development of nuclear. However, almost zero on the development of economy. For example, between 2013 to 2017, North Korea, under Kim Jong-un's instruction, North Korea newly added 25 special economic zones. That were really great efforts for development of economy. But at the same time, because of the intensive nuclear and missile tests and the fast-growing UNSC resolution making sanction measures on North Korea. So as a result, they got development of nuclear weapon and missiles. But for how about the 25 zones plus the other zones, including Kaesong, almost zero. So that is the opportunity cost. So now we talk about lifting sanction to make a breakthrough. You know, the opportunity cost at the economy means their achievements of their security. That is what they made during the past few years. So now we turn to the opposite way, say, okay, you give up your security achievements and I will fill up your 25 zones. So I don't think that will make a deal. So what North Korea really concerned are not only the sanction measures, but simply saying three category things. New type of DPRK-USA relation, and a permanent peace regime on the peninsula, and then denuclearization. That clearly listed in the Singapore joint statement. So I think if we really want to make a breakthrough, we really need to think measures not only on economic sanction, but also the security arena matters. And exactly speaking, between the security arrangement measures and sanction measures, for North Korea, I believe top-level measures should be at security. And the secondary, sanction measure is really important, but at secondary important. Thank you.
예, 감사합니다. 자, 그러면 우리
Thank you very much, Dr. Kim Joonhyung. Could you try to summarize everything here? As I said, I don't think it is mutually exclusive that wanting for sanctions lifting and the security guarantee. But the problem is economic sanctions lifting is the end goal. It's not that. North Korea wants more. So beyond the lifting of sanctions, of course, they want the compensation economically. They want support in terms of economic arena. But also, the ultimate goal is to have the security guarantee. So sanctions lifting is not enough for North Korea. So we need to consider Plan A and Plan B with regard to North Korea. Trump has three options. The first one is that after the breakdown of the Hanoi summit, they could go for maximum pressure. And second option is to maintain the status quo. And third one is to be more active in resolving the current impasse. I don't think Trump can imagine himself to break down everything that he has been focusing so far. So he would not go for option one. So practically, there are two options for the U.S., second and third option. So, but in terms of the North Korean stance, I believe Trump has achieved a moratorium on the nuclear testing and missile testing, and that is the greatest attainment that no other previous U.S. presidents could attain. So Trump would not nullify his achievement when opting for option one. So I think down the road, what is important is to consider what is important for Trump. What kind of gains will be there for Trump? So that will determine the future progress of the negotiation. And also, if the status quo is not maintained, that is a kill point for Trump administration and Trump himself. So I believe North Korea could push for, option 2 or option 3. So everything broke down in Hanoi. So things got worsened at this moment. So probably Kim Jong-un understands that there is a high possibility that if we choose wrong acts, everything will go down the drain. But he has several options. He could go for provocation, but he would be very cautious to launch a calculated provocation. To give a warning to Trump that North Korea can go back to the to the 2017 condition. In the middle of 1990s, the years of hardship was very severe for North Korea. So Kim Jong-un now stressed that in his statement that we need the North Koreans should go for self-reliance. And Kim Jong-un also wants to show his authenticity and the real intention to go for denuclearization and changing relationship with the U.S. So those are some of the options for North Korea. And also, there are some of the expectations of North Korean leader Kim Jong-un when President Xi Jinping visits North Korea. Some say that because of the current trade war with the U.S., Xi Jinping will go for the North Korean issue and use North Korean current negotiation status as a provocation to the U.S. Because of the trade war with the U.S. I think that is too much of a stretch. Of course, China wants to, have a lot more options with regard to the U.S., but I don't think, President Xi Jinping would use North Korea as a card, hidden card, in his negotiation with the U.S. So please look at page 40 of the booklet. I think the comments there are in line with what Leon Seeger just mentioned. So there is a table, 3 tables are there, exchange equation in Hanoi. If you look at the yellow box, the yellow box were already agreed upon items between Stephen Biegun and Kim Young-chul. And actually, this pre-agreement was made out to the media. So it says pre-peace declaration. So I think that is equivalent to the end of war statement or declaration. And also opening up a liaison office and humanitarian assistance or cultural exchanges between the two countries. These were already agreed upon amongst the working level officials between the two countries. And the actual signature will be made, was to be made at Hanoi between the two leaders, but because of the, result of the Hanoi, those signatures were not made. And also, North Korea here emphasizes on making a small deal, that is the Yangbyeon versus partial lifting of sanctions. And here, South Korea appears in the scene. So North Korea wants South Korea to be involved in making a small deal out of North Korea, out of the U.S. And also, they refuse to disclose what is Yangbyeon facility. So because of this uncertainty about the Yangbyeon facilities, what it has, the U.S. cannot accept the North Korean proposal. So if you consider the special character like Trump, he would, want to have a credit on himself rather than giving credit to President Moon Jae-in by giving this small deal to North Korea. So in the future, if there were the third summit between U.S. and North Korea, I believe we need to expand the package. So Yangbyeon plus ARPA. Now, moratorium is there on the testing of missile. So in the future, at the third summit, the moratorium can include development of nuclear weapons or development of missile program itself, not the testing. And also Kaesong industrial complex reopening can be part of the package. And also, Trump can issue an administrative order to give security guarantee to North Korea or some sort of peace agreement with North Korea. I believe if that could be made, then the problem can be more easily solved. Because at this moment, no party can imagine that peace deal can be signed between the two parties. But the problem here is that they are kind of looking for the right condition and looking to the other party whether the other party is willing to give something. So because of this impasse between the two leaders, Washington and Pyongyang, Korea is in a very difficult situation because Korea, as a mediator, has to give some sort of motivation to the two leaders to reopen the negotiation, which is understandable. But so far, we were kind of methodological mediator, which means that Korea has played as a mediator to let the two leaders meet. But we need to go further than that. So we need to be, raise our stake in this process to involve in the bigger picture and bigger package kind of a negotiation.
So, I mean, we don't have much time now. So as we have done before, let's give each 3 minutes. Now 5 panelists have had their say, but if you have additional comments or anything to say, please do so. So anybody can go first.
예.
You see, we have been discussing the nuclear problem of the Korean Peninsula today. And the resolution of this problem is actually not a regional case. It is a new and unique challenge of global importance. Because after all, in this case, we are not talking about ensuring a certain balance of nuclear missile capabilities of the two opposing sides, which would limit the threat of conflict, as it was before in the case of the Soviet Union and the United States. The challenge is to convince a state which has created nuclear weapons as its only security shield to give up that shield in exchange for international guarantees of the integrity of its borders and independence. It is a principally new task. That task has never existed before. And this is the task for the whole global international community. Because unless this issue is solved, there would be a kind of chain reaction for the whole globe. Already we have certain countries which are not the members of Non-Proliferation Treaty, which have their own weapons. And if we do not solve this Korean issue, the number of those who do not recognize the Non-Proliferation Treaty will grow. We should stop this process. That puts a special importance on all of us. But what I also must stress, that very important in this job, in this work, is to achieve peace between two Korean states. Because actually, the nuclear program of Pyongyang was a kind of a result of long-term confrontation between South and North of Korea. If there is peace on the Korean Peninsula, it will help us to settle the nuclear issue. Thank you.
예, 예, 감사합니다. 가토 선생님.
Yes, I basically want to agree and echo Ambassador IVASHENTSOV just said. This process of denuclearization negotiations in North Korea will have enormous impact on the security of the non-negotiating partners and beyond. And it's not just a Usdprk, it's not just an inter-Korean negotiation, but it's a security of surrounding states who do not have the seats in the negotiation. And I want the negotiating countries be fully aware of that situation. And so United States and or ROK is negotiating the security of the entire region and beyond. That's the reality. And I don't want to threat or intimidate, but I just want to tell you the reality, a piece of reality from surrounding country, on surrounding countries. If United States or ROK did not extend enough consideration to that nature of this negotiation, and if the result of this negotiation may be in the form which do not represent the interest of other countries who do not have the seat in the negotiation, that may force the other countries to take alternative strategic options, which the region may not want to see. With that, I stop. Thank you.
I'll just say
Yeah.
one word
Goes
to Mr. Kato's thing. If I'm reading the North Koreans right, they're making Abe pay a price for his reluctance for many years to allow others to negotiate, never mind for Japan to negotiate. But ultimately, the North Koreans need a fundamentally new relationship, as they agreed at the Panmunjom declaration with you, they need a new relationship with you, not just with the U.S. and ROK. And so at some point, they're going to turn to want to negotiate with you too. That would be my guess. Again, the world's uncertain, but that would be my guess.
예. 뭐
So any additional comments? Dr. Shi, you want to make comment?
Yeah, just one comment. Actually, we are facing two tasks on the peninsula as the two fundamental issues. For the denuclearization, the key task is whether or not we can set up a permanent peace regime that can replacing the so-called nuclear deterrence. Say, if we really want to persuade North Korea to give up their nuclear weapons and missiles, first thing first is we need to let them in confidence. Say, even without the nuclear weapons, they remain believing they are in security. So how to remove their nuclear items from their hands, meanwhile let them in confidence? I think we need a replacement. That is the permanent peace regime. That is why I say binding regime, composed by a series of legal documents. And the task two, fundamentally, the two Koreas, as well as in this region, China, Japan, US, Russia, we need to explore a way to replacing the existing competing security with the shared security. The Korean Peninsula is a typical case. The two Koreas have been in competing security. That means whenever the North feels more secured, then at the same time, South Korea will certainly feel more unsecure than before. For example, when North Korea got a nuclear weapon, they are glad to say, now we are more secure than before. But at the same time, South Korea will get more feelings and worries about more unsecure than before. And when South Korea got the so-called extended nuclear deterrence from the United States, and the South Korean people glad to say, we are more secure than before. Then at the same time, North Korea will feel the opposite way. So each side's efforts to increase their security will certainly trigger the reaction. And then you have been in a long-term interaction, unfortunately, in negative way. And in the region, we are also in a ironic, stupid, competing security. So I think if we really want a durable, relaxed peace and prosperity, we need to explore, jointly make efforts to explore a replacement, replacing the competing security structure. Thank you.
예.
한 가지만 꼭 말씀드리고 싶은 게 뭐냐면
One thing I really want to think is that we should be cautious to, control the speed. Trump says that it's not in rush, and it sounds reasonable, controlling the speed. But I don't want to say, last, but this is like really good chance, and we can miss out on it. On the latter part of this year, there will be opportunity, but there's no guarantee that we will succeed in that. So we have to catch this opportunity. Last year, I met with the high-ranking North Korean official, and I said the same thing. Regime change in the South Korea and U.S. Is a stress to North Korea, because North Korea is also concerned that the next administration will go back on their promises, because it's a new administration. So for North Korea, what it wants is that it wants irreversible result. Otherwise, they have to come to the negotiation table too many times. Well, thank you very much. Up to now, we have heard 5 experts' opinion, and it seems that all 5 experts are from different countries. And if we had one North Korean here, we could have 6-party talks on this stage because each country has one representative. But this also means that we cannot really have consensus because the level of trust and the level of trust on North Korea as well as Trump, U.S. is different, and their perception of North Korea is also different. So how reach Peninsula and how to go forward, I think there are 3 commonalities that we could find. I first talked about sanction, but let me just share my opinion before we bring this session to close. When Kim Jong-un came to the summit meeting, I think their strategy was 2-layer strategy. What I mean is the first layer, or the first step, is that for North Korea, this initial denuclearization efforts, as Dr. Yang said, they have stopped nuclear test, and ICBM launch on the underground test ground has also been eliminated. But the U.S. failed to put something on table for that. So then they gave up Yongbyon, and as a compensation for that, what they wanted from the U.S. is, as you know, on the civil side or the private sector, economic sanction, they want a lifting of that sanction. That was their first level strategy. Of course, first level strategy, if you have that economic sanction lifted, and then as Leon has said, then liaison office and the end of war declaration was already agreed upon. This is important because they want some water in their pond. They want to breathe. So they want to do at least minimum of their economic development. And another thing is in February, and the sanction could be lifted. They come to the next stage, which is long-term negotiation would start for denuclearization versus security of their regime. So with that 2-level approach, they went to the negotiation table with the U.S., but it collapsed. So they are switching their strategy. So now they're saying let's swap denuclearization and security of the regime. It sounds very easy, but it's really difficult to do because in last few years, the conflicts and fight between U.S. DPRK was all about regime security. With regime security, if these 2 parties goes to the negotiation table, it will be a lengthy negotiation. So when sanction alleviation was proposed by the DPRK, it should have been accepted by U.S. So my small idea is this: what DPRK wants and U.S. want. U.S. wants giving up of Yongbyon, and whether that was said in Hanoi and whether the DPR agreed on that, we don't know. But after the collapse of Hanoi meeting, the diplomatic, the foreign minister of DPR said that. But Trump wants more. Trump, whatever the agreement with DPRK, Washington is ready to oppose anything that Trump said this is the deal. So they want strong denuclearization. They can overcome such a resistance on the domestic front for Trump. So they want more than just giving up on Yongbyon. So since 2016, they want sanction lifted on the private sector, and if the Washington thinks it's too far, then maybe only partial lifting of sanction, maybe that could lead to some big deal. So maybe if we can start that small and simple step, of course it might not go my way, but we need to start something, and it could be the first step. We always talked about in abstract, this is good, this is bad, and we all say we need to talk in the big framework, but all the good things that came still out of Hanoi. In Hanoi, Trump said that with the Chae-Sun-hee, what Chae-Sun-hee said, they have talked about different things, and there were complications. So this useful leverages in solving this deadlock. Then, at the third summit meeting, maybe some conclusion can be drawn. So next step, if we have this type of conference, specifically in terms of methodology-wise, as I said before, maybe the different deal approaches can be put on the table by panelists also, rather than talking about abstract. Anyway, Super Week has started, and tomorrow, between China and North Korea, they will meet, and whether they will come out with one step up. I mean, Dr. Yang said, let's not be too optimistic, but let least some hopeful result hopefully comes out from North Korea meeting, and in Japan meeting also, and also between ROC and U.S. Summit meeting, something can be come out. And no, it's a difficult situation, but I hope there will be positive energy coming out of all these activities. Thank you, panelists. And actually, I wanted to give some chance to ask questions to floor, but you know, everybody had different opinions, so I didn't know what to do. But so let's draw conclusion here. Thank you very much.
So our panelists for their diverse perspectives and insights onto North Korea. Thank you very much.